Djúpt inni í jörðinni slær eldhjarta.
Það eitthvað að gerast á skaganum. Eitthvað sem við getum ekki útskýrt.
Það mun gjósa það á mér.
She's beautiful, isn't she? Mother Nature.
My name is Ugla Hauksdóttir and I am the director of the Icelandic feature film, The Fires. I think I was always quite a creative child. I'm an only child, and so being alone, it was a lot of relying on my imagination. And so I was interested in the arts and I guess sort of artistic expression quite early. And when I was, I would say like 11 is when I really started to become interested in photography, and I got like a little digital camera from my father, and I basically took it with me wherever I went. So I was very quickly interested in capturing moments on camera. At the same time, my mother, who is she is an actor and she's a theater director now. But she was working in theater, and she did a couple of films when I was young. And so she used to bring a lot of kind of very artistic films from the library for me to watch when I was young. I moved to New York when I was 15. Okay. And I did 2 years of high school, and I then applied to it was like a high school program offered to students at a very good college called the Cooper Union. It was a fine art school. That's where I got to experiment with photography, like real photography for the first time. And so I was shooting on film, and we even made our own pinhole cameras, and so I kind of got exposed to the sort of the old technology of photography, and I was, doing, running around on the streets and documenting New York, experimenting with different things and doing multiple exposures, and then, we developed the film ourselves, and then I spent a lot of hours in the darkroom, and I just really, that's sort of where I fell in love with photography. But I think what became quite evident in my photography work was that I was always working with time. So I was working with multiple exposures, and so it was almost like I was trying to tell stories within each frame. And so I think in some ways this was something inside of me saying, you need to be moving towards moving picture, and so eventually that's what I did. When you move around a lot as a young person, you manage to adapt quite quickly. So I do feel like I have home in many, many places. And I've filmed actually all over the world. I've been filming in Thailand, in South Africa, in Canada, in the United States, and London and Spain. I've been all over. But at the same time, I think my first exposure to the film industry was definitely in Iceland. I graduated, after I studied at the Cooper Union, I ended up pursuing my master's degree in screenwriting and directing at Columbia University, New York. And this was after I had done my first short film, which I made here in Iceland. It's a little film called Vera, and has my mom actually as the lead actress in that. And so my first on-set experience was here in Iceland. I collaborated with the film school and collaborated with a bunch of film students that came and helped me make my first short film. And that's really when I kind of, I had no idea what filmmaking was, or what directing really was, or what writing a script really meant, or what trying to make a movie, like how complex that all was. But I think in some ways it can be like the best thing to not know anything, because it means that you're not scared of it. And so I sort of jumped into the deep end of the pool, as we say. It's an Icelandic expression. I think it's only Icelandic. But that was my first exposure, and I had like 12 crew members and like 12 actors, I think it was. And it was a very ambitious film, it was like 10 days of a shoot, and I just loved it. That's really when I kind of realized, like, wow, this is actually where I belong. And this is what pushed me to then apply to Columbia University, where I did my master's. Mm-hmm. I did And of course, that's where we start to work on a lot of student sets, and you kind of build experience. And I tested being an actor. I tested out being on camera. Doing the camera work. I did sound. I did lighting. I did art direction. I did costumes and makeup. Like you kind of try doing everything. So, but directing was always kind of where my heart was. And I made my first sort of big short film at the end of that education. And that film did really quite well and traveled to many festivals around the world. But also I received a very big award from the Directors Guild of America. And I think this sort of is what became the I guess sort of the big beginning of my career is getting that recognition from the DGA in the US. And then Baltasar Kormákur, who is Iceland's I guess sort of most famous director. He works in Hollywood, but also is an incredible voice here in Iceland, and has built a big film studio here and brought a lot of foreign. He kind of manages to bring Iceland and Hollywood together in some way, and so obviously that for me has been a great inspiration. But he saw my short film and then gave me an opportunity to direct 2 episodes of what was a hit show at the time, a show called Trapped. Great passion of mine is to do music videos. I've done quite a few of them, all for Icelandic artists. And I actually, when I was younger, I had a lot of interest in music myself. The father side of my family is very much in music. My grandfather is one of Iceland's great pianists who passed away earlier this year. And my grandmother's a piano teacher, so music was always a big part of my life. And so I found kind of a way to bring music and filmmaking together by collaborating with my good friends on making these little music videos. And of course, that's, a big challenge is that you never have any money to make. There is no money in music videos, and you want to make really good things, but it all has to be sort of just by the, I sometimes call them love budget films instead of low budget films. It's like love budget because that's what you have to work with. It's just people's generosity. But I think that sometimes when you have limited resources, it also, makes you kind of think more creatively.
You've done like short films, worked in TV, but your first feature comes just now. Was, the feature always the goal, or did it just happen?
The feature was always the big goal. I think for any filmmaker, making your first feature is always kind of like the top, where you want to go. And actually, when I was in film school, I never had imagined that I would be working in television. I didn't watch a lot of television myself. I was mostly watching like weird art house films. But then when I graduated, I signed with my agency, my talent agency in Hollywood. And the first question they asked me is, we will help, we want to help you make your film, but would you be interested in, getting some experience by working on TV sets? And because of Trapped being offered, I just kind of got addicted to the experience of that, and I really loved working in TV, and it's a way to, you're not making your own film, but you still get to be a really strong creative collaborator. And actually, I'm really thankful that I didn't make my first feature film as I had just graduated from film school, but that I've waited all this time. And it's hard to get a first feature made and financed, and you have to have a lot of people to support you for that to happen. But I feel like just having the experience of working on professional film sets really helped me make The Fires. And I think it's also just like being older, being a little bit more mature, knowing more what I want to create. I think is a blessing in some way. Even though I thought that my hope was, that I would graduate and make my first feature film, and you have all these dreams, and then, it's been a different path for me. But it's it's a really big moment of pride to have managed to make a first feature film. And I'm very thankful to have received the support from the Icelandic Film Fund, for example, to be able to make a first feature film. And there's been a lot of support here in Iceland for that. And I'm proud to be from a country that has a film fund and does support young filmmakers who are sort of making their first steps as professionals.
So this summer, like you have two big premieres.
Yes.
Like just 2 weeks before the fires, I saw the announcement that Alien Earth premiered and that you directed 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Could you maybe talk about that project? How did you get involved, and just in generally?
When I graduated film school in 2016 and I signed with my agency in Hollywood, they asked me, if you were to work in television, if we were to try to pursue TV directing gigs for you abroad, who would you want to work with? And Fargo, season 1 of Fargo, the TV show, had just come out in 2014. And it was my favorite TV show at the time. And so when they asked me, my agents asked me that question, I told them I want to work with Noah Hawley, who is the creator of Fargo. And of course, this is like me, young filmmaker, just like speaking out my biggest dream. And of course, thinking that this would in no way ever become a reality. But my agents listened. And I got a phone call just a year and a half ago, and my agents told me Noah has seen your work and he wants to meet with you. And just getting an interview with him was incredible. And so I spoke with him. He told me about the show. He shared with me some scripts, and you always know that there's, you're one of a few directors that they're considering. But I think we had just really good chemistry, and even though I still didn't believe that this could ever happen, I got a phone call about a week later, and Noah invited me to be a part of Alien Earth that shot in Bangkok, Thailand. And so I was in Thailand last year for 3 months on what I would say is one of the biggest TV sets in the world of last year, and of course Alien Earth now being one of the biggest shows streaming, was an absolutely incredible experience.
Could you maybe just briefly talk about what the show is about?
Alien Earth is based on the original Alien films, the Alien film franchise. The first film directed by Ridley Scott, who is also an executive producer on the show. And Noah Hawley, he takes definitely sort of creative license and sort of puts a new spin on the Alien franchise, and which was very exciting to be a part of. So I think, on the one hand, it definitely is absolutely a tribute to the original films. I would say in particular Alien 1 and Aliens, the second film. But basically, unlike all the Alien films that we have seen, suddenly there's a spaceship that crashes on Earth. And what that means, it's not good news.
How much out of your comfort zone is all of this sci-fi element? It's quite different from, art house or everything else you've been doing before, I guess.
It was definitely a new challenge for me. I had not had any experience working sort of within the horror sci-fi genre. And it's definitely like a new way of thinking, and you need to keep your audience on edge at all times. So it's not only about creating, emotional performances with your actors and telling a good story. On top of that, you want to make sure that everyone is leaning forward and holding their breaths, and so we talked quite a lot about that, sort of how to create good horror and how to build good dread. But what I love about Noah's work, and I guess this is sort of where I'm more in my comfort zone, is that he writes really good characters. And there's a lot of depth. They're all very three-dimensional. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad. They're always interesting and nuanced. And so I think for me, I'm very proud to have been part of the show, but I think my biggest pride is, I would say, is my work with the actors. I think I just had a really good chemistry with them. It was a very intimate collaboration. We managed to make it very intimate, even though it was like such a big set. I mean, there were like 800 people working on this show. And yeah, I think that we got really interesting character work that draws you in and makes you care more about the characters that are then going to find themselves in some very, very dangerous situations.
How much of creative freedom would you say you have? Because, you know, there are like 3 directors in this season, I think.
Yeah. Noah Hawley is the lead director, so he directed the first episode, and Dana Gonzalez is, he directs 4 episodes out of the season, and they have been working together for many, many years, and they did Fargo together, for example, so it was a really interesting thing to be sort of the only new member to their team. But so the way it works in TV directing is that the lead director, the pilot director, is sort of the one who sets up the creative vision. And Noah was very clear from the start what he wanted the show to look like and feel like and sound like. And so I guess my job as a director that follows is to take his vision and then sort of expand it into my own, and finding a way to create continuity in terms of the directing style. And so we had many meetings to discuss what that was, and I was also, I had access to what we call dailies, which is basically the material that he was shooting, and so I studied that to the bone, and yeah, it's exciting because it also sort of forces you, I think we all have sort of our, I guess, organic way of working, our organic way of how we, kind of like a vision that is somehow shaped in who I am. And we all have that, but when you're working on a TV show, you're sort of forced to step out of your own comfort zone and find a way to work within the vision of someone else. And I think it allows you to grow quite a lot. And so that was just really exciting. And I deeply respect Noah and Dana, so it was not a bad company to be a part of.
Okay, should we start talking about the fires? How did you get introduced to the story, and, you know, how did the project take off?
So I was living in New York and traveling quite a bit already because of my TV directing work. And Grímar Jónsson, producer of Nettop Films, he called me sort of blindly one day and introduced himself and said, you know, I've been following your work, and there's a book that I have recently read that I absolutely have fallen in love with. And I wanted to see if you would be willing to read the book and consider coming on board as a director. And actually, because I was living abroad, I wasn't even aware of the novel. And so the first thing I did was I read the novel over a weekend. And, you know, as a director, you get sent things all the time, a script for whether it's TV or film or books and things. And when I read The Fires, I just immediately knew that this was something for me. I felt that the topic was very, very interesting, and the character work as well. And I just really thought this concept would make a really good film.
As a director, have you considered writing your own script for your first feature, or like how did it feel that something just got sent to you?
I think the idea was always that I would, I never thought that I would work on an adaptation of a novel. And I had written a few scripts when I was in film school, and I had been developing a few concepts, but I don't think that I had found it quite yet. And I think with like every project that I was working on, with all these TV gigs, like you start to, you mature and you change and you adapt, and so something that I worked on in film school, something that I really truly developed quite far, suddenly wasn't what I wanted to make. And so yeah, it was a surprise that my first feature film would be an adaptation, but it's also really interesting because you're sort of in a dialogue with another writer. On top of that, I have a co-writer on the film. His name is Marcus Engelmeyer. And he is somebody who I went to film school with. I met him in Columbia University when we started 13 years ago. And we ended up being, we're also partners in life, and we just had a really good working relationship. And so we have been writing together ever since. And he was an absolutely invaluable collaborator on this project. And it was helpful because he's not from Iceland. It was helpful to have somebody who didn't know everything about volcanoes or about how the politics or how all of this works in Iceland. It was really helpful to have that outside perspective because, of course, while this film is very much about Iceland and very recent events as it turned out to become, we also want this film to be very accessible to a foreign audience, and we hope the film gets to travel and be seen by many people in the world.
How different is the film script from the book? And have you in any way collaborated or consulted the book's author?
It's an interesting process to make an adaptation because, of course, you're taking something like, I think the book is, 7 hours to read, and you have to somehow find a way to compress that into, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I'm very proud of that. We managed, I think, to keep sort of the scope of the story, so we have the full arc of the story. But of course, there is a price to pay when you have to cut it down. And an example of it is that in the novel, Anna, our volcanologist, who the film, our protagonist, that the film centers about. There's this little story about her mother and her relationship with her mother, and it's a really, really fascinating when you read it in the scope of the story. But it kind of became almost like a film of its own. So we knew very quickly that there just wasn't going to be space for that within the movie. So you have to, I think, kill a lot of darlings, because when you read a book, and we of course read it again and again and again, you become very attached to many things, and you start to care about the novel kind of like as the author would. But then you have to make these sacrifices, and there were some scenes that I absolutely loved, but there just wasn't enough space for them. Mm-hmm. But that's just the nature of the game. The Fires is about Anna. She is a volcanologist who is responsible for predicting volcanic activity that could threaten infrastructure and eventually, as in the film, the capital city. So she's in this very, very big role of responsibility for basically, in a way, predicting the unpredictable. And so while she is sort of working towards understanding these earthquakes and eruptions that begin to take place, she falls madly in love with Thomas Adler, who is a Danish photographer who travels to Iceland to document these volcanic events that are happening. And this is something that I just loved in the novel, is this concept where the volcanic eruptions become sort of this metaphor for what's happening inside Anna, because she's married, she has a family, and she actually has sort of this perfect life. And suddenly when she falls in love and these volcanic eruptions happen, everything sort of becomes uprooted. And there's this almost like explosive eruption that happens in her personal life. And so I just really responded to that in reading the novel, that there was sort of the symbolism of fire and ash and storm and these eruptions, and then we have these like big emotions that are taking place in her private life.
The book kind of made the news because it got published when the volcanic eruption was happening, or kind of around the same time. But in the film, you kind of combine like a few eruptions. Could you maybe talk about what kind of eruption is described in the book? It's all fiction, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what was quite extraordinary is that the book was published in the fall of 2020, and the wave of eruptions began in March 2021. So Sigríður Hagalín is sort of kind of predicted what was going to happen. And when I read the book, there were all these earthquakes that had started to take place, kind of in sync with the release of the book, which was kind of strange. But I think nobody imagined that what she described in the book would become a reality in any way. I met Sigríður Hagalín for the first time on March 16th, 2021, and 3 days later is when the first eruption took place on the Reykjanes Peninsula, and that's the first eruption in 800 years. So that was kind of almost like a symbolic moment for us. It was almost like, she was like, yeah, you can, have the novel and make this film, and Mother Nature was like, yeah, let's go. But at the same time, we stay true to the book in terms of the volcanic events that take place. But of course, in reality, we've now had 12 eruptions. So, and we've had, what started out as a very beautiful tourist eruption, then turned into a horrible disaster for the people of Grindavik, who had to be evacuated permanently. And many who have lost their homes and may not return. So that was quite strange to experience while we were basically writing the script. And, of course, we had these moments of thinking, should we try to write what's happening in reality into the script? But of course, we don't also know how this is going to evolve, what's going to happen next, because this volcanic chapter is still going on. And then it was also just this reminder, like, no, you're making an adaptation of a novel, and so that's what we're going to stay true to.
Could you speak about the challenges of making this film? Because, technically making a volcano apocalyptic movie, I assume is quite a challenge and a risk.
Yeah. The technical challenges we had on the film were immense. And also to make what is essentially a disaster film with a romance story, to make that type of a movie on an Icelandic budget is no joke. Like, I'll be very honest. We had to be really resourceful and creative in terms of how we were going to achieve these really large sequences. And thankfully, we had such an incredible team of people that just had the best, greatest ideas. And we found really, I think, smart solutions that make, what essentially is kind of like a low-budget disaster film look like $1 million.
So you mentioned that you started working on the story in 2021, right?
Yeah.
So when did you start shooting, and how long was this process? So did it really take 5 years or 4 to make this film?
We got the rights 4 years ago, and we were writing the script sort of on and off. Of course, you go through many drafts of the script, but also I was working on TV shows at the time, so it didn't slow the process down, but it takes a long time to finance a film, so that's basically why we couldn't make it quicker. But even 4 years for a first feature in particular, but even just to finance a feature in 4 years is actually very normal. If anything, it's not very much. But we shot the film, we started shooting September last year, and so the premiere marks the kind of the 1-year anniversary of the film, yeah.
Are you nervous about, it premiering in Iceland?
Yeah, it's much harder to premiere something here at home in Iceland than out in the world on a TV show that, and of course the difference is that I also, am responsible for the script. And so that's a new feeling for me. And I think, when you are working on something for so long, you have a very complex relationship to what you create. And so especially in the post-production when you're watching the film basically like every single day. Some days I loved it, some days I hated it, some days I just felt nothing, and then I loved it again, and then I didn't like it at all again. And so it's like a real roller coaster ride. But I'm very standing on the stage yesterday, having shared the film with our first live audience, I felt very proud. I hope you have a chance to catch The Fires at Bioparadís, which begins screening the film starting September 25th, and it will be playing with English subtitles, so I hope you enjoy it.